All right. So before we get started here, a couple things. Hoping I've been reassured top heads can work today. We'll see. I incorrectly told you apparently, even though it did work for some students because they told me, but EduRoam is supposed to be the one that you have your device on. Make sure, and we're going to use this later on, you aren't logged in on multiple devices. So if you're on your phone and your laptop, that can cause some issues with your account getting logged in the top hat when you use it. So make sure you're only on one device. Make sure that device is on EduRoam. I won't expect it necessarily today. If it ends up being a problem, we'll work something out. I've got a backup plan. But if you want to use your phone, you do have to register your phone number. I put an announcement up on Canvas of how to do that. So if you aren't able to do it in class today, that's all right. But kind of moving forward, if you want to use that phone instead of your laptop, you can go on and register your phone number. It's got kind of put a link on the Canvas announcement, so it's a walk through exactly how to do that. Hopefully, like I said, the multiple devices, the EduRoam, talk to the building people, they came in, check things out. Hopefully we're good to go today. We're probably going to kind of just take attendance first to see if we can get everybody in. Then we'll go through the questions. If for some reason it doesn't work, I've actually got a quiz set on Canvas that I'll kind of release while we're in class today. And we'll kind of see if we can kind of operate it from Canvas instead. But we'll get to that later on in the class. Once again, getting logged on to whatever device you want to have top hat pulled up on now is probably going to be helpful once we get there later on in class. Okay. Other than that, we've got the slides for this week. The module reading was due last night. So one thing to kind of reiterate, don't wait until the last minute to do these module readings. They're due when? 11:50, right? So I say it's the end of the day, but we talked about this issue of that it has to sync up. And so it's not going to let you work on it past 11:50, okay? So make sure you're getting on, not waiting for the last 10 minutes to do that, right, at the end of the day. Also, I put an announcement up yesterday. I know there's an issue with question 5 in the quizzes. There's just different variants of the answers I didn't think of. So it's like 0.2 was the answer. Some people put 0.20. I hadn't anticipated that. We're kind of adding in the units of bicycles, depending if you had a lower or uppercase letter. So I'll get all of those added so that if you have any variant of the answer being 0.2, it will get counted as correct. I just wanted to wait until after the due date so that I didn't get on and just so happened when I was on, someone was taking it and it kind of screws up their submission. So I'm waiting till after the due date to go back on. Everybody who put 0.2 there or 1/5 or some variant of that will end up getting credit. I just have to go in and kind of manually do some stuff this afternoon. Okay. So it should be done by like 3 o'clock today. Okay. Any other questions for me before we dive into material? Yeah. You can't see these? So you guys can't open these up? What error is it giving you? Let's try something then. Wasn't aware that I had to make all that. So we'll see if now this will work. Now we'll let you open up the skeleton slides. Okay, thank you for letting me know that. So I forgot I have to unlock on not only the home screen, but the files that I had there early as well. So the other thing I wanted to mention that is an announcement up there, and it's not that big of a deal. But I mentioned like day 1, there's extra economic tutoring sessions that aren't just specific to this class, but there's like B252 and E370, I think, that go there for this extra tutoring session. It's over in Wiley Hall, the same building as my office. Usually it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 6 to 9. Apparently it didn't work out. They had to change it. It's still 6 to 9 on Tuesday, Thursday, but Wednesday, 6:30 to 9:30. So I just wanted to make sure I kind of updated that information. I put an announcement on Canvas as well. Okay. Any other questions from diving material here? Okay. All right. So I like this chapter a little bit more than the last one. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but what we're going to talk about today is basically how markets work. How do we end up seeing the different prices of goods? How do we see the number of companies, right? How do they decide how much to produce? And so we're going to talk through all of the mechanisms, all the different topics that exist within this. So we'll first start out thinking about just a market, right? So a market is going to be for a specific product, and it's just a group of buyers and a group of sellers of a specific product. we can make this very narrow. We can also keep it pretty wide. So I could say, what's the market for, I don't know, specifically Nike shoes? I could also just say, what's the market for just shoes in general, right? So we can define markets a little bit more narrow if we want to, but generally it's just a specific product where we have buyers and sellers of this good. A competitive market is going to be one where they come together and basically these buyers and sellers, based off their wants, their needs, their cost of production, we're going to end up them arriving at a price they both agree on, right? You can almost kind of think about this as like similar to what we were doing with like terms of trade, but a little bit different. So we're going to talk specifically about what we call perfectly competitive markets. So these are going to be markets where no one buyer or one seller has any influence over the price. We eventually will talk about markets that aren't perfectly competitive. We know they exist, right? But an example of what a non-perfectly competitive market would be is you only have one seller of the good, right? And so, you know, if I want, if I want an iPhone specifically, it has features that no other phones do that I like. There's one seller. I have to pay whatever price they're charging, right? I can't kind of shop around. Now, when it comes to maybe something like a bottle of water, right? That's going to be a lot more competitive. Every bottle of water, to me at least, every bottle of water is exactly the same, right? And so the companies there, they're all producing the same product. They're not going to have any influence over the price because if they try to charge a higher price, what am I going to do? If I'm in the store, I've got two bottles of water, different companies. One of them is charging $2, one of them is charging $1. Which one am I going to buy? The one that's cheaper, right? So what does the other company have to do? They have to lower their price in order to convince me to buy their product. So we're going to be talking about markets more like a bottled water market, right? There's no influence over the price from any one buyer or one seller. Okay. So the first thing we'll talk about is demand. So there's two terms. We say there's demand, and then we have this terminology of quantity demand. Right? So quantity demand is going to be how much somebody would buy at a single price. So the quantity demanded, when a price for a bottle of water is $1, my quantity demanded might be 3 bottles. It's a specific number that I would be willing to buy at that price. Now, if the price of a bottle of water is $2, maybe now my quantity demanded is I only want to buy 1. Right? And so quantity demanded is going to change as that price changes. Okay. So the law of demand, I think this is an intuitive one, but as the price of something goes up, what do you think happens to the quantity demanded? Things become more expensive, you end up buying less of them, right? It's not changing, blowing any minds probably here yet. So we have this inverse relationship, right? As price goes up, quantity demand tends to go down. Now, the rate at which it goes down will change depending on the good, but we'll kind of get to that here probably next chapter. I don't know, you can kind of use some arrows if it's helpful. We're going to just assume for now, to make things a little bit easier, that this relationship, it's inverse, but it's also linear. So if you go to intermediate micro, you'll start to see things like curves that have, a relationship that has some curvature to it. Here, we're just going to keep things linear for right now, okay? So what's kind of driving this law of demand? Well, first of all, if someone increases the price on something, as long as there's some other substitute. So this is the idea we said, it's not just one seller of the good. If someone else is making bottles of water, when one company tries to raise the price, I'm going to substitute away from that company and buy from another, right? Buy from the one that's cheaper. So this kind of substitution effect, right, that we can stop buying this good and start buying another company's, that's going to drive this inverse relationship. And it doesn't just have to be that. It could be that I'm spending a certain amount of money on a bottle of water. If it becomes very expensive, if bottles of water all of a sudden are $100, how many do you think I buy? 0, right? What do I do though? I'm taking the money I was spending on bottles of water and maybe I substitute it towards, I don't know, some other type of drink, tea, right? I don't know, coffee, something else to drink, right? That's relatively now cheaper. So this substitution, it doesn't even have to be the same good. As something becomes more expensive, I'm going to take my scarce resources, my income, and stop putting it towards that thing that is now more expensive and buy things that are less expensive. Right? Also, we have this income effect, right? Even if the only thing in the world I want to buy is a bottle of water, right? If I increase the price to $100, well, maybe I only have $100 in my bank account. I can only buy 1. If it's $1 and all I want is about, I can buy 100. Okay? So we have both this substitution effect and this income effect are telling us that as that price goes up, people are going to be buying less and less of this good. Right? Both of them are kind of driving this inverse relationship. Okay? Any questions on that? I don't think it's terrible yet. Okay. So we're thinking about what we call the demand schedule. So instead of quantity demanded, we want to kind of give a visual to this relationship between price and quantity demand. So a demand schedule is just going to be, here's all the different combinations of price and the different quantity demanded from consumers at each one of these prices. So I've got what? Some dumb example here from Zoolander, orange mocha frappuccinos. So the demand schedule is going to look like a table, right? It gives us all the different prices, and at those various prices, how many would I be willing, or how many would I want to consume? You know, and even at 0, you might think, well, I just the infinite number, right? Well, I don't know. Even 12 orange mocha frappuccinos is probably going to have a negative impact on your life. Even if the cost is 0, the marginal benefit starts to become negative if you probably drink too many of these things, right? So just for the sake of this example, we'll kind of start out thinking about it, even if there was 0 price, there's going to be some max of this good that we want, right? You can think about it this way, like if I have a constrained space, like even cars, I would love to have an additional like extra car, but even if the price was free, I don't want 100 cars because then they're just on my front lawn. I can't drive all, right? At some point, you know, I'm only going to want a certain amount given my living situation. So kind of a dumb example, but we usually do have kind of this limit at 0, right? It's not just going to be infinite. And then as the price goes up, given my income constraint and given the other goods I can buy, I start to buy less and less of this good. Okay? So here you can think about price. If we had that as our y-axis and quantity demanded as our x-axis, we could actually graph this relationship, right? I'm just going to go ahead and plot each one of these points, right? So maybe, I click off on, there we go. So all I'm going to do is plot each one of these points, right? The first point is going to be at a price of 0. We had a quantity demanded of 12. And then the next one, at a price of 1, my quantity demanded was 10. And then 2, 8. So on and so forth. We just plot all of these points. I've kept here, I said for the sake of this class, we're just going to keep demand linear. So it'll always look like this, right? It's this inverse relationship. So when I say inverse, this means that you're looking at the slope of this relationship. It should be negative. So the demand curve will always have a negative slope, right? It's always sloping downward because of that income and substitution effect. I could find exactly what that slope is, just like what we were doing with the production possibilities curve. How do I find the slope of a line? Change in y over change in x. Here, my y is the price. Quantity demand is the x. So the change in price goes from 6 to 0. Change in quantity demanded goes from 0 to 12. Right? So what, negative 6 over 12 or negative 1/2 is the slope of my demand curve here. So when I plot all these different combinations of price and quantity demanded, that gives me my demand curve. Okay? So demand is not quite the same as quantity demand. Demand is showing me the relationship between price and quantity demand. Any questions on this before we keep moving? Okay. All right. So behind every line on a graph is an equation, right? So what is our demand equation going to look like? Well, it's always going to kind of take our general form, right? We're keeping it linear. So we're just calling y, right? Actually, I think you've probably seen this in other classes here. Is this upside down? No, okay. So I don't know. I think this is like the standard one that they use in a lot of like algebra classes, y equals mx plus b. All we're doing is our y was the price, our x was quantity demanded, and I was just using the values of a and b here to kind of represent. Actually, let me make sure I line this up with the slides. I think I chose a as the slope. No. Scratch that. I chose a to be the intercept and b to be the slope. It doesn't really matter, right? We're just kind of using some variables. So in practice, these are always going to be some number, okay? Now, this is our intercept, right? So what does the intercept represent? Well, it kind of represents, here's the price at which quantity demanded would be 0, right? That's what our intercept is going to represent. At this price, our quantity demanded would be equal to 0. And then as the price, what would the price have to go up by for us to buy one more unit of this good? Right? That would be kind of our slope. So just to kind of match it up with something you maybe have seen before, that's all we're doing, just the kind of general linear equation. Get switched over. There you go. So A and B are always going to be just some number. And typically, I'll keep them usually pretty nice, keep them as integers, right? But they could be decimals if we wanted to. What's going to be true about B is, well, we know there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, so it has to be that the slope is negative, right? B will always be a negative value, okay? The intercept, right, is always going to be something above zero for our demand curve, right? There's going to be some price at which we will buy zero, right? So yeah, price, I already said this, is where, in our example before, where were we getting a quantity demanded of zero? At a price of $6. 6 was our y-intercept here, okay? That's the price at which this person would buy zero of this good. And then our slope is kind of the price change that we would need to see in order for us to buy one less unit, right? So the price decrease we would need to see in order for us to buy one more unit. Or if you want to say it the opposite way, the price increase we would need to see for me to buy one less unit. Just same thing in different directions. So in our example, we had a slope we already said of -5. So our demand equation, we have that intercept of 6, just plug that in. We've got the slope of -0.5. Plug those values in and we're done. Any questions over how I'm coming up with this equation here? So you can use the table and say, I know the intercept is going to be the price at which quantity demanded is zero. Or if you do have this graphed out, it's very easy. It's just your y-intercept, right? That y-intercept represents that price where quantity demanded is zero. And then how do you find the slope? Well, we've already talked about this, change in y over change in x. So for us, this is going to be the change in the price divided by the change in quantity, right? Price is our y-axis variable. Quantity demanded is our x-axis variable. All right. Any questions here? So, well, I'll come back to it. So we want to connect this idea of the demand curve with the marginal benefit. So if we go back when I was doing my stupid example about buying a cold beer after I mowed the lawn, not last week, but the week before, I had some dollar amount that if you were charging me, like I said, I think if my neighbor was like, hey, $15, I'd be like, okay, all right. It must have been that marginal cost of 15 was still below my marginal benefit. So let's say, for example, the value I put on that beer after mowing the lawn, and I don't have any, my neighbor's trying to sell me one, is I'd pay up to $15. Well, if the price was 10, I'd still buy that. If you charge 11, I'd buy that. 12, yes, because the marginal cost is still lower than that marginal benefit I have of $15. That's how much I'd be willing to pay. As soon as it gets above that at $16, well, now the marginal cost to me is above my marginal benefit. I won't buy that anymore. So this demand curve essentially is telling us, okay, at this price, this is how much I was willing to pay for that last unit of the good. Or it's telling us the marginal benefit to consumers of whatever quantity we're looking at. So we can think about, for our example here, what was the marginal benefit of the first, second, and third? Well, if I go back here, just to look at this table, when would I buy kind of that first orange mocha frappuccino? Well, it's kind of tough here because I got jumps of 2. But if I went from $6 to $5.50, at $5.50, we'll see quantity demanded is 1. So it must have been that very first orange mocha frappuccino, that first drink, I didn't have a marginal benefit greater than 5.5, because if I did, I would have bought it when the price is above 5.5. It's not until the price falls below that I choose to buy that first unit. And in fact, we don't say below, but as soon as it's equal, right? We would say consumers are indifferent. As soon as that marginal benefit would be equal to the marginal cost, or in this case, what's the marginal cost of the consumer? The price. Okay? So then as that price falls, we said, what happens if I have more and more of something? The marginal benefit is, if I need something to quench my thirst, the first bottle of water has a huge marginal benefit. Now that I'm drinking the whole thing, drank this whole thing, what's the second unit's marginal benefit? Lower. We have this diminishing returns. So this is exactly what we see in our demand curve. Because if I want to know, okay, when will they buy the second unit, or when will they buy that second drink? Well, now the price has to fall to $5. My marginal benefit of that second drink wasn't as high as the first. So I'm willing to buy that first one at a higher price. The second one, I'm only willing to buy it if the price is a little bit lower. And then the third and the fourth and et cetera, right? So skip ahead here. There we go. We think about our first, second, third. There we had marginal benefits, right? I was willing to buy it as soon as that marginal cost was equal to my marginal benefit. So that demand curve told me those first 3 units, it would have been at $5.50, $5, $4.50. How was I getting these values? I know they were kind of in between. Oops. But we can determine what the marginal benefit is by essentially, and I'll use the example I had there. So price 6 minus 0.5. Thank you. There we go. Sometimes the touch screen's a little sensitive. There we go. So here's my demand equation. I can think of what this price is really telling me. It's the price at which I decide to buy different number of units of this good. Well, I know that the price at which I'll decide to buy something is when that price is exactly equal to my marginal benefit. As soon as it falls just to hit that marginal benefit. So you can think of it as what that demand curve is actually telling you. You can interpret price as the marginal benefit of the consumer, because we know that the person will only buy this as soon as that price is equal to their marginal benefit. So when I was thinking about something like, let's do what would be the marginal benefit of the fifth drink here. I don't think 5 was one of the values in our table, but from the equation, all I have to do is plug in the quantity I want to find the marginal benefit of, and I get what? $3.50 would be that price at which the person would buy the fifth unit, or that price reflects that would have been their marginal benefit. Their marginal benefit of that fifth unit was $3.50. So at any price higher than that, they weren't buying that fifth unit. But as soon as that price hits their marginal benefit, now we say they would be willing to consume that. Now, technically, they're indifferent at that point, right? Because the difference between their marginal benefits, marginal cost is 0. So they're no better off if they buy it or not. But we always say people will buy up to the point where they're indifferent. Any questions on this? Good with this? Yes? I know we're doing a little more math, so right, you need to do something, stop me. We'll go dive a little bit deeper. Excuse me. So now we know that our demand curve, it kind of starts to make sense. Why is it decreasing? Well, because of this law of diminishing returns. As people buy more and more of something, that marginal benefit is declining, they're willing to pay lower and lower prices. Okay? So now we're going to make a distinction between, okay, I've kind of phrased a lot of this in terms of like one person, right? Your individual demand curve. But in our economy, we have multiple individuals demanding the same product. So what we're going to do is essentially go from individual to market demand. How do we do that? It's pretty easy, right? If we have 2 individuals, so here I've got Zoolander and Ken, right? All you're going to do is take every individual's demand curve, or their quantity demanded at various prices, and just add those up, and that will give you market demand, right? So, kind of makes sense. If at $1, Zoolander is willing to buy 10 of these drinks, and Ken is willing to buy 11, well, then if the price of these drinks are $1, what's the total demand out there in the market, assuming we only have 2 people in this market, just to keep it simple, right? Well, 10 plus 11, 21, right? And then what about if they increase the price to $2, what is market demand? Well, one person's demanding 8, the other person's demanding 10, just 18, right? And then so on and so forth. So nothing crazy here, right? To get market demand, all we're going to do is add up every individual demand curve at every single price. Any questions here? Now you'll notice what's true about my market demand curve. Well, if every individual's demand curve is decreasing, what has to be true about my market demand curve? It's decreasing as well, right? Now, the rate at which it decreases is going to be different, right? So for instance, I think when we did this one, we had what, -1/2 here. Oh, I think this is only going to be -0.25. If I'm doing the math in my head correct. So we can have individuals have different slopes, right? Their demand curves might have different slopes. And then when we add those up, we kind of get like this mean slope, right? The average slope across all individuals. So I think here, instead of 1/2 and 1/4, right, we get kind of the average of the two. But I'm not going to I'm not going to ask you questions about that, but that's the idea, right? Everyone's individual demand curve is downward sloping, so we'll end up with a market demand that's also downward sloping. Okay, so we could then plot that just like we did the individual demand curve. We have all these different prices, we have all these different quantity demanded from the market. All we do is plot those, and we've got a market demand curve. Yeah. No. Yeah, so yeah, it's getting a little bit more mathematical, but if we add up a bunch of linear equations, we're still going to end up with a linear curve at the end. I'll never give you anything where it won't be linear. Any other questions before we keep moving here? Mm-hmm. Correct. So the way that we always kind of visualize this relationship between price and quantity, I guess, are you asking because I have P written first, it should be the X good? I understand where that comes from, what your confusion is. Generally, demand schedules, we always kind of put price on the left-hand side because we think about this is the amount that's going to be demanded, quantity demanded at these various prices. Like these prices are being set, what would my willingness to buy? Like how many would I be willing to buy each price? When we kind of give a visual representation to it, we always put price on the y-axis and quantity demand on the x because we're thinking about people are making this decision of how much to buy. You could flip it and it still tells you the same thing. It gets kind of weird to talk about it. Like it's just not how we generally show it, but it would still show you an inverse relationship, right? It would just be telling you slightly different things. So now your intercept would be telling you, this is the quantity that I would be demanding when the price was 0. And the slope would be telling you, this is how much less I would buy if the price went up by $1, as opposed to how much does the price have to change for me to buy one more unit. And we just generally think about consumers, their decision process being, do I buy the next unit? And so that's why we put that quantity on the x-axis. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah, if I go back here, what would be the market demand at $5? I just add up every individual's demand curve, total of 8. Yep. Any other questions before we keep moving? Yeah. Yep, so if I have a linear curve, the slope is always the same. It doesn't matter which 2 points I calculate it at. So for example, if I go between 6 and 5, right, my change in y was 1, change in x was 3, 1/3, or negative 1/3, right? If I go from 2 to 3, change in y was 1, change in my x or quantity demanded was 3, still 1/3. Doesn't matter which of these points I choose, for a linear curve, we'll always find the same slope. So I won't be able to plug in the slope. Anytime I want to find the slope of something, it's change in y over change in x. For us, what is our y? Price. What is our x? Quantity demanded. So I will have to calculate the slope based off those different prices and quantity demanded values that I have. Yep. Any other questions before we keep moving here? Okay. All right. So where are we at? Oh, perfect. All right. So we've got this market demand curve now, because ultimately the price of goods is going to be impacted not by any one individual's demand, right? It's going to be impacted by the collection of everybody's demand curve, right? Market demand. So we're going to kind of use this ceteris paribus. We're just trying to understand the relationship between price and quantity demanded. We're assuming everything else is constant, or nothing else is changing, right? Just the price was changing, and we got a different resulting quantity demand, or we got a different quantity demand as a result. But we know in life, lots of other things in the price of a good change that might impact whether or not I want to make it or I want to buy it. So we won't use this example specifically, but you can think about like let's say I have technology breakthroughs. I used to buy CDs, right? I no longer buy CDs anymore. The price could be significantly lower than what I used to pay for them. Now there's other things that I can substitute away and buy, right? So we know there's things that change that will impact how much people are willing to buy the good. In fact, my wife made fun of me the other day because I said something about like Post Malone's new CD, and I was like, I just aged myself to the fact that I don't call these albums now or something, right? I know they probably still have physical CDs, but nobody, at least, I mean, how many of you have a CD? Own a CD? A handful? Yeah. They're like almost novelty at this point. I digress. So we have these things that changed, right? We're going to think about all these other things that we were holding constant. If they start changing, what are the main ones that are going to impact our demand curve, right? So here I just got kind of a basic way to think about this. I'm going to actually draw this out because I think I can make a little bit more sense of it. And then you just have the drawing to go back to in the slides. But I think seeing me build this out will be helpful. So let's say I've got some demand curve, right? And I want to think about something that changes. So I'm going to jump the gun a little bit, but in general, we have these things and we call them normal goods. This is like most goods, how we would think about them. So cars, clothes, shoes. If I have more income, what do you think probably happens to people's demand for most goods? If I have more money, I'm going to buy more of them, right? And so at every single price, if I now have more income, I might be willing to buy, well, here, think this way. At each individual price, I might now be willing to buy a higher quantity demanded. And it doesn't matter. I've got more income. So no matter what the price is, I might now be willing to buy more. And so my new demand curve is going to be shifted to the right. Okay? So when we think about increases in demand, everyone's different of how they remember this. For me, it's always connected that like shifts to the right are increases. But if it helps, right, this is really a shift like up and to the right. So kind of shifts up for demand are increases. Now, the reason I don't like to use that is because once we get to supply, it gets a little bit confusing. So if you, just for now, I understand that it might make sense that it looks like this is going up, so it's increasing. Just for the sake of once we get to supply to make it a little bit easier, think of increases in demand as rightward shifts. If I'm shifting to the right, I'm increasing. Another way to think about this is, if that demand curve is moving further away from zero, it's increasing. Right? So shifts to the right reflect that at every single price, because of this thing that changed, because I have more money now, I'll be willing to buy more of the good, no matter what the price is. Right? Any questions on this before we keep moving?
What is the notification about that? Oh, yeah.
It was supposed to be the word new. I have terrible handwriting, but yes, new. Yeah. We'll go through a bunch of them here in a second. Yep, I'm just kind of showing you how you visually see these increases and decreases before we talk about the things that cause them. So you can put this on the same graph, you draw on a different graph. So if you want to, you kind of probably don't have to redraw it. I'm going to just to make it a little bit cleaner. But here's my old demand, showing me that relationship between price and quantity demanded. Something changes. I'm going to see that at every single price, if I now have less money, at the same price, I'm probably willing to buy less, right? So at every price, I'm willing to buy a lower quantity demanded now. Leftward shifts are going to be, and the slope should have been the same here. I just not great at drawing lines. I'm going kind of quick here. So this was kind of going to be our decrease in demand was leftward shifts. And then our increase in demand, that was going to be our rightward shifts. Okay. So what are the things that actually cause these shifts? I kind of alluded to one of them already, which is income, right? But we've got a bunch of different things. Okay. So what I just had drawn up there basically was what's on this slide. So just a different way of looking at it. I just think seeing kind of that connecting to the fact that at every single price, the quantity demand is either increasing or decreasing, makes those shifts make a little bit more sense. Okay. All right. So the first thing, this is very, I think, obvious. If we went from a one-person economy, in our example, we had Zoolander's individual demand. What happened when we had a second person in the economy? Well, initially, if we only have one person, their demand is market demand. As soon as they add a second person, what happens to market demand? It goes up. I've just got more people buying this good. I'm adding up more quantity demanded at every single price. So the number of buyers, right? Anytime we see an increase in number of buyers or consumers, that's going to increase our demand curve, right? So we said increases are this shift to the right, right? So anytime we're adding more consumers to the market. So how does this happen in practice? Well, like population growth can do this, obviously, like you have more people, that you just have more consumers. But what do companies try to do? What's a major thing? In fact, it's a major within Kelly. Market, right? Marketing. Because there might be consumers out there that don't even know my product. And so they don't have a demand for my product until they know it exists. So companies all the time are trying to shift their demand curve through bringing in more buyers to their product, right? I can't tell you how many stupid things I bought from ads on Instagram or whatever, right? So this is the idea. If we have more buyers, we're going to see increases in demand. Now, you know, it worked the opposite. If I had like a third person, right, I kind of add in, I'd have an even higher market demand curve. And we could have the opposite of this. Like you can technically have decreases in demand if you had fewer consumers. You know, for the most part, you know, this used to not be a real concern because population growth was always above 2. So people were replacing themselves. I think in the US, it's on track to fall below 2 or very, very close. I know Japan, I think, is already below 2 births for every 2 people. So we're not replaced. We are actually starting to see population declines in some countries. So a lot of companies are probably very concerned about that, right? Because what's happening to market demand as population decreases, demand is decreasing as well. There's fewer individuals out there to add up to get market demand. But yeah, as we just add more people, that market demand curve just keeps shifting more and more to the right. We have to take people away, and we would have kind of this shift to the left as well. That's just not as common. Although, like I said, the way that things are moving, that might become more of the norm than they used to be. All right, any questions on the buyers? This one's fairly easy, I think. Okay with this? So what about income? So I talked earlier about normal goods. This is, I think, the most intuitive. This is what we would generally think of. If you have more income, you want to buy more mansions, you want to buy more, you know, Lamborghinis, you want to buy more clothes. You generally think about, if you have more money, I'll buy more of different products. So these are what we call normal goods. And this will be most things that you and I probably buy. Right? However, we also buy another category of goods in which income and the demand curve work in opposite directions. So for normal goods, when income goes up, so does market demand, right? So clothing, I have a bunch of examples. We also buy inferior goods, or maybe if you've got enough money now, you no longer buy them, but you used to, right? So I used to buy a ton of ramen, right? And like also really, I'm sure, not healthy for me chicken from like mass amounts of chicken from like Sam's Club and stuff, right? Well, as I have more money, right, I don't have to buy these things anymore. I start to substitute away from them. As I have more income, I no longer buy my chicken at, you know, in bulk at Sam's Club or even at Kroger. I actually, you know, subscribe to maybe one of these Butcher Box or Good Ranchers or one of these companies that has some higher quality meat. Now, I'm only doing that because I have more money now, right? When I don't have as much money, I actually demand more of these inferior products. When I don't have a lot of money, I'm more likely to buy things like ramen. And if ramen's a bad example, like you actually like it, even if you were a millionaire, you'd still eat ramen. Then don't think of that. The easiest one, think about for income and inferior goods. To me, this always makes the most sense. And when we're walking through these, one suggestion I would say is whenever I'm giving examples, try to think of one that connects to you. I try to throw some out there that I think might connect to a lot of you, but everybody's different, right? So for these inferior goods, I think one that connects to a lot of people is used versus new cars. New cars are normal goods. When people have more money, they typically demand more brand new cars. They can afford them. Used cars, as I have more money, it becomes less likely I'm going to buy a used car, more likely I'm going to buy a new car. So having more income, actually we see the amount of used cars demanded goes down. It's an inferior good, right? They work in opposite directions, okay? Any other What, any questions on this? Yeah.
Instead of.
It might have been a typo.
Instead of a bunch of times.
Really?
I wasn't sure if it was supposed to say quantity.
Actually, let me write this down. No, I don't, like I said, it might be a typo. I didn't write this chapter luckily, but otherwise I'd have to fess up to it. No, when we're talking about what's quantity demanded. Yeah. Public transportation is another one. As you have more income, you don't have to rely on public transportation as much. You can afford parking passes on campus or whatever it is. Okay. Any other questions on this before we keep moving? Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. So I would think of it as when I have more income. If I had more income at the same price, I'd be willing to buy more. Right? So increases in demand are shifts to the right because at the same exact price, when I now have more money, I'm going to buy more of the product. Okay. And then inferior goods, if I saw an increase in income, what's going to happen to an inferior good? Well, if I have more money, I don't buy as much ramen. I don't rely on public transportation as much. So even if it's the same price, I would be willing to buy less of it or consume less of it. So if you want to, with this, you can kind of think of on the right, for an increase in income, that would be a normal good. On the left, increase in income, this would be representing kind of an inferior good, where we'd see a decrease in demand. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Slide around.
Yeah.
So it says that it increases the quantity demanded at each price, which shifts the demand curve to the right, which makes sense. But then when I was doing the reading, it said that price, which in that case, I would think if you raise the price of an item, the quantity demanded comes down, yet the overall demand didn't move to the left.
Yeah, so this demand curve is telling you about the relationship between the price of that good and how much the market is willing to buy. So changes in the price of the good you're looking at don't shift your demand curve. All that's going to do, let's say the price was, I don't know, $10 here, right? If I see a decrease, or you could do increase, or if I see a decrease in the price of this product so that it's now $8, it doesn't shift my demand curve. It's just putting me at a different point on my demand curve. So changes in the price of a good will change quantity demanded, right? That's what we're graphing out here, is the quantity demanded at every single price. So when the price of a good changes, we're just moving along this demand curve. If anything else changes, right, all that stuff we said, ceteris paribus, we're holding everything constant in order to understand the relationship between price and quantity demanded. But if one of those other things changes, the relationship between price and quantity demanded hasn't changed. So you can kind of think about it like the slope of that curve hasn't changed, but I might see a shift in that curve, right? It might have the same relationship, but I'm going to see more of it purchased, right? Because there's just more people in my economy, or people have more income, or whatever the example. Yeah.
Essentially, all these other things are moving demand because they're not represented directly by the graph, whereas price is directly represented.
Exactly. Yep. Any other questions for a keep moving? Okay. I'll make sure I save us enough time, but we're doing pretty good. So, right. So I get the paycheck, stops buying Natty Ice. I stop buying these like really poor, low quality beers. You might start buying, something better. Right. This is the idea of kind of our inferior goods. Okay. So another one that is kind of tricky a little bit is, and I'll draw some shorthand here that I think will help in a second, but substitutes and complements. So substitute goods are goods that we would use in replacement of each other, right? So examples, let's just think of any of you want. Let's say I want a pop and I've got Pepsi or Coke, right? I can buy either one. They're substitutes. To me, I don't know. I can't really tell the difference between the two, so I don't care which one I have, right? And you know, you have a strong preference that changed it. But two things that you can buy, one of the you know, substitute goods. Coke is pretty similar to Pepsi. If all of a sudden Coke is $5 for a 2 liter, $10 for a 2 liter, you're probably going to be more likely to buy Pepsi, right? So when you have substitute goods, if the price of one good goes up, so the idea of Pepsi and Coke, if you go to the store all of a sudden and now a 2 liter of Coke is $20, the prices went way up. What do you think probably happens to the demand for Pepsi? Goes up. People are more likely to start to substitute away, even if the price of Pepsi hasn't changed at all. Because the relative price, right, of its substitute, Coke has went up, it now is much more attractive to consumers to buy that lower price product. So anytime you have increases in the price of a substitute good, that's going to make you less likely to buy that good, more likely to buy its substitute. Right? So just kind of shorthand this. So when I've got substitute goods, I think about it as I'm thinking about the demand for good X, right? So if you want to, in our example, I think I was using Pepsi. And then the substitute good, some other good Y, right? This in our example was, we're thinking about Coke. If the price of Coke goes up, what's going to happen? Its substitute, the demand for Pepsi would go up, right? Coke is now very expensive. People stop buying it and start buying its substitute Pepsi. If instead the price of the substitute goes down, what's going to happen to the demand for the other product? Well, now, let's say you go to the store and Coke is 50 cents for a 2 liter. How many people are going to be buying Pepsi? Hardly anyone, right? I mean, maybe the diehard people who are like, I only can drink this one specific type of cola, which is all the same ingredient, right? But most people are going to buy less. Right? So with substitutes, the price of the substitute good and the demand for the product you're looking at are going to move in the same direction. Okay? And that, you know, there's, you know, I don't know if that's intuitive to you or not, but the idea of them being substitutes, when the price of one of them goes up, people are more likely to buy the other good. We see a shift in the demand for the other product. Okay. Any questions on? Yeah. Yeah. So there, if you're thinking about, if you are only concerned with the market for Pepsi, if you see a change in the price of Pepsi, so here, you see a change in the price of Pepsi, what's going to happen to demand? So change in the price of this product, what's going to happen to demand? It's not going to shift at all. We're just going to be moving to different points on the demand curve. So we'll be moving to a different quantity demanded for Pepsi, but the actual demand curve itself isn't going to shift. We're just moving to a different point on the demand curve. Mm-hmm.
But if price comes down,
Well, if I'm not, well, that's a different market, right? If I'm interested in the market for Coke, when Pepsi, well, if Pepsi lowered their prices, what's going to happen to the demand curve for Coke? It's going to go down. So I get this decrease if I'm looking at the market for Coke. There's two different products, right? I can only look at one market at a time. So a change in the price of Pepsi in the market for Pepsi will just move me to a different point on the demand curve. In the market for Coke, a change in the price of Pepsi shifts the demand curve, right? Because it's a substitute good. Well, so we have to touch on more topics, say like what the optimal kind of price setting would be with competitors and things like that. But for now, we're just understanding what that relationship is. How would it shift demand? Yeah. Yep. Yep, so further away from zero would be an increase.
That if it's more upright, then what is that?
So I'm drawing these quickly. These slopes should be the same. Don't worry about the change in slope. I'm trying to draw them fairly parallel.
That, that demonstrates the demand for the change. What is this? What is the?
What's the slope represent?
Yeah.
So what would the slope represent? If I have a steeper slope, that's telling me that larger changes in price are going to result in not a large change in quantity demanded. I'm going to need huge price changes to convince someone to buy one more of this good. So we'll touch on that next module. That's the idea we call kind of thinking about elasticity. It's not quite the same as slope, but it's close. Yep. Any other questions before we keep moving here? Yeah. Oh, yeah. We won't touch on that, but you could graph out the relationship if you wanted to. It's a little bit more complex than what I expect you guys to do. But yes, you could put a graphical representation to what that relationship is. If you're interested, you can talk to me after class or office hours, but yeah. Complementary goods, right, are going to work the exact opposite. So these are two goods that I use together. So, if you look at an econ textbook, a lot of times they'll be like peanut butter and jelly. Gasoline and SUVs are a good one. My example that's dumb that I always use, where I said it, is going to be this clicker that I use to kind of go through these slides. It requires a AAA battery. So if AAA batteries all of a sudden are $100, what do you think happens to my demand for this product? It goes way down, right? Because I can't use this product without a battery. I need both of these goods. They're complementary. I can't drive my car without gasoline. Well, as the price of gasoline continues to go up, what do you think is happening to the complementary good of electric vehicles? It's going up, right? So you think about, I shouldn't mix those two up, but that was a substitute good one. But we can kind of think about the substitute good I might see more of, but the complementary good, right? What uses the gasoline? SUVs, gasoline-powered SUVs. As gasoline gets more and more expensive, what happens to these more traditional just gas-powered vehicles? We see people want fewer of them, right? So there, we actually have, for complementary goods, and we can do, I want price of Y, demand for X. I'm going to do my example here. Was battery, my clicker, right? If I've got complementary goods, when the price of batteries goes up, what happens to my demand for this thing that requires batteries in order for me to use it? Goes down, right? And then what if the price of batteries becomes really, really low? Are people more likely to then use these clickers that require batteries? Yeah, so I would see demand go up, right? Or this is the idea of gasoline. It's really expensive. We see people stop or not buy as many gasoline-powered cars, switch over to electric. If the price of batteries is relatively low, we see the price of gasoline is relatively low. We see people be more likely, right, increase the demand for these gasoline-powered vehicles. So it works the exact. Now I've got these out of order. Oh, works the exact opposite of these substitute goods, right? For complementary goods, price changes of the complementary good. It's almost like when you increase the price of a battery, you're increasing the total price of my little clicker. So I have to have both of them, right? So they're going to be moving, kind of have this inverse relationship. So if the price of the complementary good goes up, its complement, the demand for that product goes down, moving in opposite directions, or substitutes are moving in the same direction. So if the shorthand here kind of helps keep, a nice summary of it, you're going to have that in front of you. Or just intuitively you can remember these concepts, that's fine as well. I just always like to kind of represent things in different ways. It connects with some people, not, if it's not useful to you, then by all means don't use it, right? Any questions on this? Yeah. So it's all going to look the same when we do these complementary goods, substitute goods, changes in income. I'll do one of these here. So let's look at the quantity demanded for these clickers. price of these clickers. Here's my old demand curve. The price of batteries goes up. What's happening to the demand for these clickers, the thing that uses batteries? Demand is going down. So that's a shift which direction? Left, right? Or closer to zero. So here, once again, I'm trying to keep these slopes the same. This would kind of be how that would visually be represented. And then increase in demand, just like we've been drawing all the other increases in demand, the exact same. So once we understand how to draw these increases and decreases in demand, like all of the shifts will look the same. It's just a matter of which direction does the shift changes, right? If it's a substitute or a complementary good. Any other questions before we keep moving here? Okay. All right. So some other things we'll talk about, expectations. So I'll go through these a little bit quicker because once again, the shifts in demand are going to be exactly the same. Shifts to the right are increases, shifts to the left are decreases. So if I expect to have more money in the future, what might happen for normal goods today? So if I think I'm going to have more money tomorrow, I might be more likely to buy the good today. So this is what a lot of people do, right? There's a lot of people take out loans to buy products today because they expect they'll have enough income in the future to pay those loans off. Right? So expecting higher income in the future leads to them consuming more of normal goods today. Now, inferior goods, if I expect to have more money tomorrow, so for example, if I've only got $20 in my pocket, I'm thinking about I want to go somewhere to eat, but I know that payday tomorrow I'm going to have $1,000 in my bank account. I might be more likely to spend all of that $20 as opposed to buying a really cheap meal at McDonald's or something. Right? So if I expect to have more income in the future for inferior goods, it's the same relationship as we talked about before. If I have more income or if I expect more income, I buy more of normal goods and less of inferior goods. Okay. So whenever we expect economic downturns, we'll see people, if they expect to have less income, so they think the economy's not going so well, and they don't see it really changing direction anytime soon, they stop buying some of these normal goods, these big ticket items like cars, homes, things like that, and we start to see increases in rental occupancy and these other inferior goods when people expect economic downturns. Okay. Yeah.
A lot higher expected, higher. You don't have more money right now. So why are you buying more expensive goods? Just because you think you're going to have more money in the
Yeah, if you think you're going to have, if you don't, maybe I phrase it this way. If you don't think you're going to have any money coming into your bank account over the next month, are your spending habits going to be different? Yeah, right? If you know that you're going to have a couple $1,000s in your bank account at the end of the month, what might you do? I might go to a concert, right? Because I know I'm going to be able to pay it off at the end of the month. So this is the idea. If I expect future income, my current spending habits will still change. Yeah. Any other questions? So price expectations are going to be kind of a similar thing. So let's say I expect prices to be higher in the future. So if I think, we see this sometimes. I forget the last time this happened, but it's a big thing and the news, I'm sure big oil's behind it, but they'd be like, oh, gas is going to jump 40 cents tomorrow, right? So something about the supply chain and blah, 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 blah. It's going to jump 40 cents. What happens that day? Everybody goes out and gets gas. So expecting a higher price tomorrow, what happened to current demand? Went way up, right? Because you're getting it at a lower price, you think today, than you will if you wait and get it tomorrow. Same thing. If I expect, well, I didn't have it on here, but it works the exact opposite way. What if I think that prices are going to be lower tomorrow? What do I try to do? If I think gas is going to be $1 cheaper tomorrow, I'm probably going to drive very conservatively today and try not to get gas, or I might only get a gallon today and then fill up my tank tomorrow, right? So if I expect prices to be lower in the future, what happens to current demand? It goes way down. Okay. Any questions over this site? So this is the one that is a little confusing as well because it's a price expectation. So we said a change in the price of the good moves us to a different point on the demand curve rather than shift the curve. Well, here we're not talking about an actual change in the price. We're talking about an expected change in the price in the future. So it gets I understand it's a little bit tricky there, but here is expected price change. Then we see shifts in our demand curve. Yeah. Yep. For normal goods. If it's an inferior good, when people think they're going to have less income, we actually would see them buy more of it. All right. Okay. This one is a catch-all category. I won't even use a lot of examples here because it's all just, there's no rhyme or reason. You know, tastes and preferences, all of a sudden there's some culture, you know, some rapper wears a certain, you know, product and everybody else wants it or whatever it is, right? These things that are fads, so fad diets are a good one. Pet rocks used to be a thing, right? The market for pet rocks is essentially non-existent now. But there's these different fads and shit. You have seen these tastes and preferences of the consumers shift in demand as well. It's just hard for us to know what these are actually going to be. These are always more like a hindsight, this 2020 kind of thing. We can then evaluate. Oh yeah, there was this taste and preference for this one product that shifted the demand curve way out. Okay. Fidget spinners, probably, I think all of these, no, it was a while ago, but they were like a big thing for a while. God only knows why. Yeah.
It's like, it's really time or whatever.
Well, I guess you think about like if the taste and preferences for a product decrease. So, well, I can give you an example of this. So as a society, well, I'm speaking about the US specifically, we've seen a movement towards eating, consuming healthier foods. So what's actually happening to like the market share that McDonald's used to have compared to what it has now, right? There's a lot more healthier alternative options that we see. So tastes and preferences for McDonald's back in like the 80s was like all-time high. It's probably decreased since then. Not, there's other things, holding everything else constant, just the tastes and preferences that the consumers have for it have decreased a little. Is that, but yeah, there's not as many examples of that, to be fair. All right, so let's try and see if they lied to me. See if we can use Top Hat here. So I'm first going to use this take attendance. So this is just getting the join code entered in, getting kind of logged on to Top Hat. I'll kind of wait. We'll see if we can get everybody in here. Give it a couple minutes. Is anybody having problems getting on? Handful. All right, let's give it another 30 seconds or so, and we'll see if we can kind of get all of this in. Once again, make sure you're only logged on one device. Edge your own should be the network you're using. Slowly but surely. So I don't want to take up too much of class time. So I'm going to leave this running. Yeah. So I haven't pulled a question up yet. Okay. So all you should have done right now is get logged on and put the join code in. Okay, well, just if you're logged on, then you're one of these people. So I'm going to leave this running in the background because show of hands, how many people still aren't in? Yeah, God damn it. I swear. Never mind. I don't want to rant to you guys. I try to tell people things and people tell me that I'm wrong. And I'm like, no, I was there. No one could get on. So I'll leave this up and just see if maybe by the end it works. Let's try something different. So let's go here. Let's refresh this. And you should be able to access this kind of in-class quiz 9-10 should be on the main homepage, right? So can everybody see this on Canvas? You can't get, anyone can't get Canvas pulled up? A handful of people? Is it just because your Wi-Fi's? All right. So I guess, how can we do this? Okay, so for those of you that can, we'll kind of work through these. If we're having issues, okay, so it's locked. All right, let's see if, there you go. Let me edit it. I have to see.
not.
Okay.
So you have to send all the pictures, how the lines are.
They have blocks on them. Oh, it's because I didn't add them to the list. All right, well, we'll just walk through them. I'll have to talk to the top hat people again. I might just end up doing like daily like little quizzes with these questions so that you can do them outside of class. Kind of defeats the purpose that I wanted to use them for, which was in class participation. So after class today, I'll go on. I'll set that top hat, those questions that'll almost look like a daily quiz or something like that. So these will be just questions we work through in class. So it'll still encourage participation because if you're in class, we'll work through the problems and you'll essentially have the answers, right? But I'll start putting those up on top hat. So unless they can come up with a solution, because anything they're doing clearly isn't working. Basically, it won't be in class. You'll just have to go on and get those done by the end of the week. So each class period, I'll put up a little top hat, like it looks like a little assignment, like it's like the module readings, but it'll only be a set of questions that we'll have covered in class that week. Okay. So if we're looking here, and this is where I'm actually going to stop